One time I literally had to take my shirt off. I had to, so I wasn't just naked in the studio, but it was like we just couldn't get enough stuff on that snare to make it as dead as I wanted, so I threw a shirt on it. Ended up with a big hole in the back by the end of the song.
This is the Self-Recording Band Podcast, the show where we help you make exciting records on your own, wherever you are, DIY style. Let's go. Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band Podcast. I'm your host, Benedict Hein, and I'm here with my friend and co-host, Malcolm Owen Flood. How are you, Malcolm?
Hello, I'm good, man. Back at it once again. How are you?
Good, thank you. So we've been talking before. Had a great weekend. Time to relax, and all good.
Yeah, time to relax. And there was a lightning storm last night.
Oh, wow.
It was just amazing. It was cool. Got some cool video of that and stayed up too late. Yeah, it was fun. Hey, I got a question for you. Are you aware? I feel like maybe I've already asked you this, but anyways, this company tagged me or my band in a post today, and I can't remember if I've asked you. So here goes. Are you aware of a clothing company in Germany called Band of Rascals?
I haven't been, but when I Googled your band after we got to know each other, I found it. And so I know there is, yeah.
Yeah, so they make Facebook posts every once in a while, or actually like partners, like they partner with different brands or something. I don't really know, but anyways, they end up trying to tag Band of Rascals in their posts, and they end up tagging my rock band.
Yeah.
Oh well.
So what like did you get in trouble with them or no?
No, not at all. As far as we can tell, we made our band before they started their clothing company.
Oh, okay.
And we also have the advantage of Band of Rascals being a rock band and not a clothing. Like, it just makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like they're too embarrassed to try and get in our way with that. But it's funny. At one time we had a really similar t-shirt design.
Really?
Yeah, it was too close for comfort. It was like, oh, how did this happen? But they're like a children's clothing company though, so we're not the same markets at all. And I don't know, I'm happy they exist. Hopefully they're fine with us existing.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
But
awesome.
I was curious if they're like if they're well known over there, if you were aware of them or not.
Not at least I didn't know of them, but I found them, and but it's also not too bad. I think it looks like they are like an organic, fair trade, something like that, like company, which is cool. So
yeah. If we're going to share a name with a clothing company, I would like it to be this one.
Yeah, exactly. That's so funny. Yeah. So they like, and if you like search for Band of Rascals on social, like they took over or something, like you don't find your posts anymore.
Well, like we've got. Yeah, like because we're pretty defunct at the time, so I think they're eating up the SEO. But we've got the like all the social handles like Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that. That's all ours. But then they got the .com.
Okay, bummer. Why didn't you get that like right away?
We were too slow on it. We just didn't make a website for too long.
Okay. And then it was
by
gone.
the time we went for it, they had it.
Okay.
Well.
Yeah, that's great. So, do you have any plans to like be active again or tour or whatever as soon as touring is a thing again?
Not presently. No, we're all focusing on other things. And you know, if a crazy gig came up and was offered to us, we definitely might. Well, probably would jump on that kind of thing. But no big intentions of hitting the road for a year or anything right now.
Okay, I'm just asking because our audience does not know, but we never met each other in person, but we almost had. Like, if you were like going to Germany, I think, but I couldn't make it to the show or something. Or did the show even happen?
We played Hamburg, which is kind of close to you, isn't it?
No, not at all. It's like the opposite end of Germany. It's like 1,000 kilometers away. Like, but you were supposed to play like an hour away from me. And I think that show got canceled or at least like rescheduled or something. So I couldn't make it to the show, which was a bummer. And if you ever come back to Germany, we'd finally had a chance.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Eventually, for sure. Yeah. And I'll definitely be going back to Germany one day, even if I'm not playing music. I loved it there.
No, that's cool. Okay, so then, let's jump into today's episode.
Sure thing.
And this is a first The first time we do something like this, because we are answering one of your questions. Like a listener or at least a subscriber to my email list sent this question. His name is Rollo. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. And he asked a very good question, and we thought we'd make a whole episode out of it. So his question via email to one of, like he answered to one of my newsletter emails. If you haven't subscribed to that, you can do that by like downloading anything on my website. If you enter your email, I got it and I will email you. So, no, but he's a subscriber. He reads the stuff that I put out, and he asked the question, and that is, "Hi, Benedict. I have been recording with my band for a while, and I've spent quite a lot of time trying to educate myself as to how to be a better engineer. Last year, we took a year off work to record our first record. We decided it was best to live track bass and drums with a professional engineer, and then record the rest ourselves, as at the time we were very inexperienced at recording. Everything went great, and we are really happy with the results. Release planned for later this year. However, for album number 2, I've decided that it would be more rewarding to record everything ourselves, which leads me onto my biggest struggle, which is how to develop a unique drum sound. All of my favorite records have a very unique, distinctive, and interesting drum sound that bring an extra layer of creativity to the record. How do producers, engineers go about designing, capturing a unique drum sound? What do you normally do when approaching recording drums for a record? Any help on this would be greatly appreciated, as this is definitely one of my many weak spots. Many thanks, and I look forward to hearing from you." First of all, thank you, Rollo, for asking this. I think it's a really great question. And also, I really think it's amazing that someone or a whole band would take a year off of work to record their first record. That shows some real passion and dedication, and I really love to read that. So I thought you really deserve to get your question answered. You're taking this seriously, and I'd love to help you. We'd love to help you. So that's why we're doing this.
Yeah, that is really cool, and great question as well.
Yeah. Like this whole, how do I get a unique sound, or how do I get a certain sound that I am envisioning for my record? That's like the key question, and so hard to answer. And I get it that this is something that people struggle with, and I can remember that I was in the same boat for a long time, and sometimes I still am. Sometimes I have to try out things and experiment to really get to what I'm going for. So yeah, this is just very logical that this question comes up. And also, I love that it's not like, how do I get to sound like band XYZ? But he's asking, like, how do I develop a unique drum sound, like my own drum sound, which is a totally different question and very cool, because that opens up a lot of possibilities. And we all love to hear exciting, unique art, right?
Definitely.
So, yeah. So my my thoughts were that we should do this in like 3 chapters, sort of 3 like bullet points that we go through. The first is, what's the vision and the goal? Like, what are you going for? And what you can do to find that, to figure that out. The second one is like the strategy on how to get there, how to get to this vision, what you can do to make that vision a reality, or like the questions you can ask yourself, and like what possibilities are there, even that sort of stuff. And then the third is the tactics, the specific things you can do to design and capture a certain drum sound, like things that impact the way your drums sound. So yeah, let's go through this.
Definitely. Yeah. That's I think you've got it laid out in a way that makes sense, and that's usually the order to consider these things, but not always as well. They're all 3 are very valuable and could be the answer to achieving the sound in your head. So let's start with visions and goals. Okay. Yeah. As you said, it's different for everybody. Some people might already have a very clear vision, or Rollo, you might even have a very clear vision of what you want to do. But it might also be the case that you're just trying to get some unique drum sound, whatever that may be. So you might not even like have found what you are going for, or what suits your band or the style you're trying to make, like the style of music. And I think anyway, it's just important to know, or to think before you even start writing, recording, or doing anything, just to think about it and have that vision, have that goal. Think about what you want to achieve, who is going to listen to that record, what do they want to hear, does that even matter to you? Is it just for yourself?
Is there a clear goal? So do you want to reach a certain type of person or certain people? If so, then you should probably take into account like what they want to hear. These types of things, because you might start off in the completely like the wrong direction if you don't answer these questions for yourself. And also, like, what is the record about? What is your band like? What's the aesthetic? What do you stand for? Is there like a certain brand or something attached to the band, or is there a certain vibe that you want to get across? Because that will automatically like eliminate some drum sounds or some general sounds and sound aesthetics, I think, right?
Definitely. Yeah, it's like if you don't have this vision in your head, you can't really expect to land on this like on a new sound, right? You need something to aim for and something to kind of guide your decisions. So I'm a big fan of bands putting together reference choices before a record. So I find that when bands have that like references pre-thought up and like arranged, and that we can look at and kind of get ideas from, things tend to go better. So like an example of that is you might be like, okay, I really like the Red Hot Chili Peppers style kind of pangy snare tone, a little higher pitched. But I love this John Bonham kick, kind of thing. Like, okay, well, how do we achieve both of those? And, or maybe somebody's like, well, I really like this modern kind of EDM style thing. Like, okay, well, that's really different. But how can we bring in some electronic elements into this recording, So by having all of these little pictures put together, or finding other songs that sound like you want, you can start thinking about how can you mesh those into your own thing and kind of cherry pick all the pieces you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rollo did that, actually. He added some names of bands that he really liked, but not like as a reference of what he wants to sound like with his band, but just as examples of bands who have a very unique drum sound. So there are definitely references or things they like, but they're not trying to copy it. They are just noticing the fact that those bands manage to have a really unique, interesting sound, and that's what they want to do. So they don't want to sound like it, but they want to be as creative as they are, basically.
Right. I wonder if in those songs, and obviously we can't really check that right now, but I wonder if in those songs, if it would be possible to listen to them and figure out what is making each of them unique, and if there's an underlying theme to that. Maybe it's that, because often when people notice things like that, it's because of a certain aesthetic that they like. So maybe all of these drum sounds have a really interesting, like room heavy kind of approach. And the answer is, looking for that interesting room that kind of speaks to your band. Or maybe it's that all of them have 24-inch kick drums or 26-inch kick drums, Maybe that's the thing that's triggering their ear to be like, oh, this is different.
Yeah. I listened to them obviously before, but it's like they are just different. They are completely different. They are unique, I have to agree, but it's not like, I was thinking the same way, but it's not like there's some characteristic that they all share. I think they just like unique tones, like really.
Cool.
But you're right. That was my first instinct as well. I don't know. It's like, it sounds counterintuitive that you need to have a goal when you try to find something new, right? Because how you don't know something that doesn't already exist. But I think you should still have some idea of at least the feeling or the reaction or like whatever you want to achieve with your music, like what impact it should have on the listener. I think that's maybe something to consider, or like how it should be perceived. Not exactly how it sounds maybe, but how it should be perceived. And as soon as we start talking now about what characteristics there are, what types of sounds there actually are, and what's the difference between those and what kind of vibe they create, it gets easier to understand what we mean here. So let's dive into the strategy and how to get there, because I think part of the strategy is, yes, the reference tracks that Malcolm mentions, and then the second thing is learning and studying why certain tones are making you feel a certain way, why certain sounds make a song big or small or impactful or soft or aggressive or whatever. And like studying that as much as you can, figuring out the differences, and then picking the stuff you like from all those different things and combining them to something new, basically. That's probably how I would go about it. And and important, as always, the most important thing here is that you keep the big picture and the goal in mind, and you put your producer hat on, and you don't really focus on like I wonder what mic they used, or I wonder what, like that's not important right now. It's just the big picture. Is it big? Is it small? Is it roomy? Is it tight? That sort of stuff, you know. I think that's what you should focus on first. It's not about the details yet.
Yeah. So one thing I really liked about Rollo's question there was that they chose to hire an engineer for the current project they're on, just because they realized it was one of their kind of weak spots. And that's awesome. And I hope that he was able to soak up a ton of info while doing that. I assume that was probably a large part of it, was that they wanted to learn from somebody experienced at the same time, which is super awesome. Now, maybe one of the mistakes that people make that doesn't land them on this unique drum sound or unique any kind of sound is that they start mimicking what they've learned, which is great because, you know, they went to the studio, saw some stuff, and I'm not saying you've done this, Rollo, or will do this, but it's just for example, you've gone to a studio, you've seen it done a certain way, and it sounded good, maybe not as unique as you're looking for your next one, but then you set up in the same way because you know that works, you know, or like a really good example of what wouldn't work is if you were doing a clean acoustic-y song, but you grabbed an electric guitar and plugged it into a distorted guitar amp, right? Like that's just like the exact wrong thing. But if that's all you know how to do, like, well, it's too bad. You have to still learn a new way then, right? So drum recording engineers are prone to kind of do the same thing. They're like, okay, I always go for this like big, larger than life drum sound. It's impressive sounding when it's soloed, but it's like, okay, well, does the song need that? Is big and larger than life John Bonham drums actually going to be helpful for the song, or do we want like this tight kind of like really pocket groove that is in the background more than anything? And that's a totally different approach. So you have to kind of think about this beforehand so that you can actually set up your miking and prep your player and write parts that actually suit that as well. That all has to be figured out in advance and then implemented.
Yeah, I'm totally guilty of like having repeated stuff just because that's the way I do it and I like stuff. And I constantly need to remind myself to just try new things and figure out new things and like experiment because I don't want my records to sound all the same. But we all do that. And there are just, if there are some things that you just like, you tend to do them all over again because why not? They work for you, right? So,
but a good idea, I think, and how I try to approach it is I still do those things. Like, you know, I've got like a set of Bloomline rooms that I'm going to set up every time, it seems.
Yeah.
I just love them. But then I'll also set up another set of rooms, like the experiment set after that.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. And what really helps me is, and that is again about the vision and the band and the aesthetic and stuff, is like to try to forget about these technical things and my approaches and techniques completely, but just talk to the band, or in that case, like have a band meeting, like, or think for yourself about what's the content, the emotion, the lyrics, what's the record about, what's the vibe, and then let that dictate the decisions. And even if it's something if it turns out that it's something completely different than what I would usually do, then so be it, and I would need to do something else. But then it's much easier to make that decision. And if I don't have the conversation, I like the danger here is that you tend to kind of bend the songs to whatever you usually do, and it's not the original song or vibe anymore. So yeah, if you like big roomy drums, but the band has a completely different vibe, different aesthetic, then have a different approach and let go of your room sound that you usually like. So in that case, like, let's talk about some specifics here. So the room has come up quite a bit. So I guess you're the same way as I am here. Like, Malcolm, you think the room is a big part of the drum tone and the vibe, right?
Yeah, I think it's like kind of the biggest part, potentially, you know, maybe other than like the player.
Yeah.
You know, like the player and the parts is obviously going to make the biggest difference. But choosing the room, like I think especially when you're talking about unique sounding drum sounds, I think the room is generally like the thing in that situation. I guess not always, but very often. If you can find a room that just kind of has a sound, that can be like a big thing right there, because that's going to be different than all the other records you're hearing. Because no room is the same, you know.
So what are those differences that a room sound actually makes? Obviously, there's like very dry and like a long reverb, like the extremes. But
Yep.
what else does it like so that people know what types of sounds there actually are, and that Rollo knows like what to think of and what's even possible? Like, how does a
Right.
room impact the drum sound?
So a studio I love in town here, Silverside Sound, is super live, really live. So it's got like the big rock star decay going on. But then there's this hallway out towards the control room, and it's like a little compression chamber. It's just like things go in there and get mangled, and then you stick a mic at the other end, and it just like it sounds insane, you know. So like there's a weird quirk like that, you know. It's like this already live stadium-esque room, and then we've got like this extra level of insanity at the end of the hallway. And like there's a song that I recently did there, and I'm using that hallway mic as like the primary mic, you know. I'm like feathering a little direct kick and snare, and then otherwise it's like this delayed hallway mic that's super far away.
That's awesome.
So that's an example of like no other, I could never recreate that anywhere else. What that mic sounds like.
Talking about unique, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, those things, and also I think the room kind of dictates, obviously, the reverb time, but also like depending on if it's like the surfaces in the room, depending on what the room is built. Like some rooms sound very like there's no other way to say it. They sound hard or harsh, whereas other rooms sound soft or dark or dull or like liveless compared to them. That's not only the time, but also the way those reflections sound. So you might not be aware when you're listening to a drum sound that it's the room that makes it sound like that. But some drum sounds that are just really bright and snappy, or others that are really soft and round and sort of dull almost, that could be the room. You might think it's like the mic or the drums themselves, but it could just be the room around the kit. So
Definitely.
Yeah, there's that
like,
difference.
Some rooms are like really slappy, like the attack is so hard that you hear it as like a delay almost, which generally is bad news, but could be exactly what you're looking for, right?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. So there's that difference. Then obviously there's a difference like with every instrument between brighter sounds or fuller, darker sounds. Oftentimes bright sounds can be perceived as like a little thinner. Oftentimes they have more clarity, but they're sometimes a little thinner. Whereas darker sounds tend to often be like full and dark obviously, but full and big. And that difference, and that can be achieved in like multiple different ways. But there's this. Just think about it that way. Like when you're listening to a drum sound or when you're creating the sound in your head, do you want it bright and clear? Do you want like a pristine sound where you can hear everything clearly? Or do you want to have like a full, dark, moody, vibey kind of drum tone? So that definitely affects how the record's going to be perceived.
Definitely. Yeah, the cool thing about the space is it does put an image in the listener's head. So whoever's listening to your song, again, if I'm using the big Rockstar live room that sounds huge, it leaves an impression, you know, like this album's going to sound like you're seeing the band on stage at a big venue, rather than in a small little room. Like, you know, there's like some indie music that's like almost like kind of like you're meant to be listening to it and like the band's in your bedroom with you or something, you know, playing in the living room or something. And that's like, I wouldn't be able to get that in there. You know, it just would never sound like that. It's too live. The decay times are too long. It doesn't have that going for it. So if you get the space that you're recording in wrong and or at least don't treat it to sound like what you want, that image is just never going to really come together.
Agreed.
So just keep that in mind, I think.
Yeah, agreed. Totally. That's a big part, actually. Like, what do you see in front of you when you close your eyes and listen to the music? That's totally a big part of it. That's also like how wide something is. Sometimes people want those larger than life drums, which is totally cool, but sometimes that doesn't sound like a drum kit anymore, or oftentimes it doesn't sound like a drum kit anymore. So when you have headphones on and close your eyes, like one tom is completely to the right and the hi-hat's completely to the other side, and the guitars are like somewhere in between sometimes, or they are like in the same spot. But if you like imagine a stage, there is the drum kit in the middle, and the guitars are left and right of that, and it's like the drum kit is more of a tight, small spot on the stage and not all over the place. So yeah, if you want that realistic image of a band on a stage, you don't want like these super wide drums, probably.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
All right.
image, big thing. Then like this whole like expensive versus lo-fi thing is also huge for drums, I think. What I mean by that is there are these like very polished, big and expensive sounding drums that have an extended top end, big low end. They are like punchy, big, clean. And then there is this kind of lo-fi vibe where you might not have a very big low end, and where there's like the top end is lacking and you have a very aggressive mid-range maybe, and it sounds like a garage recording or something like that, or it sounds as sometimes it sounds like if it's like been playing through a crappy speaker or something, or it could even be the case like as we've talked about in another episode, you can absolutely reamp drums or like use weird gear to make drums sound that way. But that lo-fi aesthetic versus the big expensive sounding drums and everything in between, that's also part of what makes a drum sound unique wherever you land in that spectrum, right?
Definitely. And one more reason to make this all like worth your time to think about in advance, like, is not only are you going to be using these decisions while you are making these decisions while you track, but having all of this like work put into the vision in advance will let you also translate to the mixer you end up sending it to, so that they can also stay on that same page and get that vision accomplished in the mix kind of thing. You know, maybe you don't have the gear you want to get it distorted on the way in, but you know that you want it to be lo-fi and distorted. Well, the mixer is going to be able to help you take it that extra little bit if you communicate that with them.
Oh yeah, totally. Like imagine if you didn't communicate that, you'd record like clean drums because all you have is like a, I don't know, 8 or 16 channel interface, and you record just clean drums and you don't say anything, and the mixer might totally like blow it up to make it this larger than life big modern drums, but all you wanted to have is a mid-rangey lo-fi thing, and it's the complete opposite of what you get then. So
that like literally just happened to me pretty much.
Yeah.
Just often the assumption I sometimes make, and I shouldn't have made this assumption, so still learning, is that like when a band sends me tracks they recorded it on themselves, they didn't have access to a room to make big, huge sounding drums. And I listened to the song and I assumed that's what they wanted. I was like, okay, everything else is distorted and trying to be big. This drum kit's meant to slam. So I made it slam. And they were like, whoa. Like, no, not what we're going for on the drums. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll have to go back on that.
Yeah.
But I mean, it would have been nice if I knew that in advance, because like rock song kind of made sense to me, but I should have asked as well.
Yeah, totally. But it happened to me in the past. It's a very common thing. And yeah, it's our responsibility to ask, but it's also, if you know that as an artist, in case the mixer doesn't ask, just tell them and make those decisions, write it down, have a conversation, or ask them to have a conversation with you. Get on the phone, talk about those things, and you will work towards the same goal, towards the same result.
Definitely.
The next thing here is clean and dynamic versus dirty and distorted. It's similar to like the lo-fi thing, but it's not the same, because what I mean with lo-fi and expensive is like when you think about the frequency content. And what I mean here is, do you want to have really dynamic drums with like clear transients from like very quiet ghost notes that should be audible to like big, loud rim shots, and it should all be clean and clear and dynamic? Or can it be like dirty and distorted, and can it be like squashed and like a little less clear? And that's also like a characteristic of drums. Like some genres require all the details and a very fine, clear sound, while others just need to slam, and like you don't care about ghost notes and details and dynamics. Basically, like sometimes it sounds weird, but some of the drums that I mix, because the songs require it, they aren't dynamic at all. They are like clipped and limited and compressed and distorted and everything, and they are like full on all the time, and it's just part of the aesthetic. But it could be totally wrong for other genres. So
definitely, yeah. It just goes back to the same thing. Figure out what that vision is, and then make decisions based on that.
Yeah. Also, what you get when you do that dirty and aggressive thing is you'll end up with probably little harsher and aggressive sounding drums because the cymbals and everything, when they get compressed and distorted, it tends to sound a little more annoying or harsh or aggressive, which can be cool. Some styles of music are not supposed to sound nice, but others are. So that's another conversation you need to have. Should it sound nice and pleasing to the ears, or should it sound a little aggressive, annoying, or like, not annoying, but maybe a little bit. Some of the punk rock or hardcore stuff that I mix shouldn't sound nice. It should be a little piercing sometimes.
Right.
That's cool. So, have that conversation. Think about what you want to do, because if it's too nice for your genre, it just won't work and won't have the desired impact.
Totally. Yeah. Well, we've got written down here, be bold. And I think to do that, you have to imagine the finished product and not just what you're listening to. And with drums, often we're listening to just drums and maybe one dinky little scratch guitar or something, So like you're recording and you're trying to make decisions based on what you're hearing. But without the whole picture there, it's really easy to get scared and be like, okay, maybe this is too aggressive and we should be safer and go cleaner and and just kind of abandon your vision. So you have to stay focused on the end goal and end vision of what that's actually going to look like. If it's meant to be distorted, then go for it. It's going to be fine. It'll sound more normal once there's a bunch of guitars in front of it and stuff.
Yes, absolutely. This is my big thing that I always repeat, and many people don't agree, especially when we're talking about DIY recording and less than ideal situations. I still think that you should be bold, and I still think that you should just do whatever you think sounds great. When there is a way to have like a safety net in place, like with a DI for a guitar, for example, then do that. With drums, it's harder to do, and maybe you could have some standard like mics, and then in addition to that, your experimental fun mics like Malcolm did. But like if you only have a limited channel count, just do whatever you think sounds rad, really. Like do what you think sounds exciting. If it gets the message across, if it creates the emotion, the feeling that you want, if it fits the songs, then just do it. Go for it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, and usually there are ways for a mixer to still fix a thing or two if you've really gone too far. Not always, but in general, it's just me. I just like people taking risks there and making unique, exciting stuff. That's just I just like that.
All for it.
Yeah, totally. So once you've figured that stuff out and you know what you're going to sound like and what fits your project in your band, I think it's crucial, and that's the not so fun part for some people, that you'll learn the engineering basics. There's no way around it, because you cannot translate that sound in your head. You cannot make that translate to speakers. You cannot make that come out of the speakers if you don't have the basic toolkit and skill set to do that. So you need to know what phase is. We have a whole episode on drum phase. If you don't understand that concept, you'll constantly run into problems, and you're going to have a hard time making that a reality, that vision. So you need to know what phase is, and you need to know at least you need to have a basic understanding of different microphone types that there are, and like how different positions change the sound, and how to use those microphone types. You don't have to be a professional engineer, but you just need to know that there are certain mics that sound a certain way, that they have certain characteristics, and if you put them a certain way on a drum, it will cause it to sound like whatever. So if you know those things, the basics of it, then you should be able to, with a little trial and error, a little experimentation, you should be able to get close to what you have in your head, I think.
Yeah. I can't really imagine trying to make a plan without knowing what a space pair sounds like versus an XY overhead setup, right? Like, so two of the most common overhead setups, but they are hugely different, and are going to give you totally different results. So unless you've had time to experiment with both of those, it's like, well, how do you choose which one you're going to go for, right? If you've never mic'd the top of a snare and you don't think that's important, well, So hopefully if you're going to be recording drums, hopefully you are in a situation where you can do some experimenting, some practice, and really kind of try things out in advance and find some cool little things. Everybody's got their favorite little tricks. some people throw something in the middle of the kit just to distort or whatever, or behind the drummer, over the ear of the drummer. There's all these little things, and you'll find something that works for the project eventually. But you need time and practice to kind of learn and develop a tool bag of tricks.
Yes, you need to do that, absolutely. And you need to know just certain things that you can't change, like phase. That's just a thing. Like that's you need to accept that it, and you need to know how to use it and work around it and not run into problems. And there's a whole episode on this. It's episode number 4. I just looked it up. If you listen to this, episode number 4 of this podcast, we're talking about drum phase and try our best to explain it because it's kind of difficult to explain. But you just need to understand this, because every mic you're gonna add and every little gimmick that you come up with and everything you add to the whole picture and to the amount of mics you use and stuff can cause problems that you don't know how to solve if you don't know what phase is.
Yes.
You're going to be running in circles. So
should also mention for Rollo and other people doing this that this takes time. Like, so you're going into recording these drums for the first time and you're trying to get something magical. Hopefully you do, but it might not be as magical as you were hoping on your first time, but you're going to get closer and you're going to learn a ton doing it. But this is the kind of thing that takes a lifetime to master. We're always learning, always. So don't worry about it. Just like do the best you can do, and you're going to take something away from this. And also you're also going to take some lessons away about stuff you wish you hadn't done as well. That's going to happen, and you'll just keep refining. So that the true unique you sound of what you can do with a drum kit is coming later in the future.
Yeah, totally agreed. It will take some time. It won't be the first production probably, but you can still get something that you're proud of, and it's the starting point. And totally do it. Totally go for it. Like, the thing with learning these things and doing the research is that you will come across other producers and techniques they use, or common techniques that people use, like Malcolm said, XY versus spaced pair, or a certain type of microphone on a certain drum. There are things that are just common, and there are ways to achieve certain sounds that just work, and so people use them over and over again. And what you need to do here is to pick the stuff that might work for what you are going for, but like put them together in a new way. So don't just copy what some other engineer does, because that won't get you a unique sound, obviously. I mean, there's still some elements of it that make it unique because it's you and nobody plays like you and it's your song. But still, I wouldn't go ahead and copy everything and imitate everything you read on a blog or wherever, or on YouTube or something. So, but I just would pay attention to why people do these things, in which context a certain thing works, and then I would pick the things that might work for my project, and then I would combine them with others. And so I would build this approach that's unique to me, but consists of proven strategies and tactics, basically. I think, that's the hard thing to do, because you don't want to copy it, because that's not the point of this episode, right? You want to be unique. But you probably, what I'm trying to say is, you probably won't reinvent drum recording as well. So you need to take those things that already exist and make something unique out of it.
Yeah. Remember, all these techniques, they're not really making it unique. They're just capturing it in a different way. So like, as we're going to continue talking about, all the stuff before that microphone is making a bigger difference. So don't get too caught up in if miking the drums with the spaced pair is too traditional for you, and that's what you see happening all the time. Well, that you can still get a unique drum sound with a spaced pair. It's it's not that meta, I guess.
yeah, totally. So let's get to the tactics, the specific things that you can use to get those sounds. So now you know what you're going for. You know the differences and what makes up a drum sound, like what characteristics there are. And now you're trying to get those characteristics, the ones you like and the ones that fit your aesthetic. So what can you do? What dials do you have that you can use to dial in your tone, your drum sound? The first is the room. We've talked about that. Malcolm said it. Choose the right room, and it will be a huge part of the character of a drum recording. Choose the wrong room, and it just won't work. And you can't get the wrong room out of the recording. Really, that's the sad part of it, but it's true.
Yeah.
So yeah, choose the right space. And if you don't have the right space, if there's no way you could get into a space that sounds the way you want it to, then I'd go for super dry, because then you can at least shape it and add some room or ambience or something to it. But if you go, as Malcolm said, into this big stadium-like space where even the close mics and the overheads will have this long decay and this room on them, you just won't get rid of that. It's just in the recording.
Yeah, that is spot on. Yeah, I am lucky enough to have like a number of good studios around me, so I have this luxury of being able to choose the drum room that I think is right for the project, and that has made a big difference in my career and the happiness of my clients. So
yeah, exactly. And it doesn't need to be, if you don't have access to such studios, it doesn't need to be a super fancy, really great sounding room. It can be, and I've done that a couple of times actually, it can be some room. When you have a mobile recording rig, you can put the drum kit wherever. You can go to a house with some cool like hallway or whatever. You can go, you can find some industrial building or something. You can rent out whatever you find. Like every building has a unique sound. Every room has a unique sound, and there's rooms and buildings of all sizes, and you can treat them a little, and like you can be creative there. And I'm sure if you really want, you can find some sort of room that you can get access to and use for the drum recording, and that can get pretty interesting. It won't be the perfect drum room or the perfect studio, obviously, but it will definitely be unique. And it's a little trial and error, of course, but if all you have is a very dry and boring sounding rehearsal space, but you want a big, exciting room, then just find some space, I think.
Yeah, I think we've covered the room thing pretty good, but it's because we keep bringing it up because it's really important.
Yeah, exactly. So Malcolm, you put the next thing on this list here, and that's choose the right drum sizes. I didn't even think of it, but totally true. What do you mean by that exactly?
I just think that the size of the drum dictates like what the pitch is going to kind of land in, and the overall tone and like shape of the drum sound. So like me doing a lot of rock music, bigger drums tend to be where I land. I like big, huge drums.
Yeah.
So almost always I'm going to lean towards a 24 kick and like a lower snare, and a couple of big toms kind of thing. So but you know, if that's not what you're doing, that might be totally wrong. If you're doing a jazz album, for example, a 24 kick's probably going to suck, and just be awful, and you like be so unruly that you'll hate your life. So, so you know, you might want to go smaller for something. It depends on the kick pattern, I guess. I don't know. Some jazz guys are going to be like, no way, but
yeah.
But yeah, so I think like it's like they're almost different instruments with how big the sizes can vary. You know, an 18-inch kick, which is tiny, compared to like a 24, which is my norm, but some people consider that big. That's like they sound like different. Like one sounds like a tom to me.
Yes.
You know, so I think that makes a big difference.
And you need to play them differently. Like you have to, if you like with a very big kick drum, you need to kick it really hard in order to get something out of it. Like a drummer, I remember like the drummer in my band used to play I think he has a 24 and he also has a 26, I think. And if you play with a 26, if you don't go hard on that thing, like there's nothing coming out of it. Basically, it's so low and so slow also that you have to play completely differently. Like
right, yeah, that makes sense. I like can barely play any drums at all. So I'm like that unreasonable producer that's just expecting things out of the drummer. But that's good to know.
Yeah. So what were you going to say? Like different instruments?
Well, I was just saying that because like when you choose different sizes, it changes the instrument dramatically.
Yeah.
So you have to get that right, and yeah, I guess the point I'm making is that a lot of people just record the kit they have, and some people have these kind of starter kits, frankly, that aren't great big rock drums, for example, if you're going that route, which is, I'm just using what I'm generally doing as an example. And that's never going to sound that way. So you have to get a great sounding rock kit if you want a great sounding rock drum sound kind of thing. So don't expect to turn something into, like, make something else.
Yes.
You have to kind of get it right at the source.
Agreed. And it's important that you put it on the list here, because I kind of forgot it, because the way I think of the drum setup most of the time is that, to me, the drum skins, the drum heads are very important. The cymbals are super important. And the shells tend to be less important to me, but not the sizes. You're totally right about the sizes. It's just, to me, the material and what exact shells you're using, that's less important to me than most people think it is. So yeah, you need to pick the right size, absolutely, and I forgot about that, so that still matters. But it doesn't matter as much if it's like it sounds different, of course, but like what brand or what type of material it is, that's actually not as important as the size and the type of drum skin you put on it and the way you play it and the room it is put in, and all that stuff matters much more. So I've had great results with like cheap beginner kits, basically. It's a little different for snare drums, but with toms and kicks, I've had great results with cheap kits. If they're tuned right, if you put the right drum skins on, if you put them in the right room. My studio kit that I love so much is pretty cheap, actually. It's like $600 or so, just the toms and the kick. So it's not the cheapest one, but it's pretty cheap. But I really, really, really love it. And if you put great skins on there, great heads, and combine it with great cymbals and everything, it just works.
Yeah. Okay, I fully agree, but I'm going to push back a little bit.
Okay.
There's something about vintage kits that sounds different. And yes. I think it's like the bearing edges,
yes, I was about
or something. But the attack and sustain, everything about them just has like this different thing going on. So I think that's like the one little detail that we should mention, is that if you're going for an overall vintage sound on drums, track down some vintage drums and it'll probably help.
Yeah, you probably want to use some Ludwig or Gretsch or something like that. And like, yeah, totally agreed. But still, that doesn't mean you can't use what you have if it happens to be the right sizes, and if you put the right drum skins on and tune it carefully, you can get pretty far, and you can probably get something out of your kit that is what you're looking for in most cases.
Right.
So yeah, then the next thing is we've already mentioned it, tuning, obviously. Like so big, and people overthink the recording part of it a lot, and they think about microphones and all that stuff, when they should actually focus on getting the actual kit to sound the way they want it to. So, yeah.
yeah, that's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, like, doesn't matter what mic you throw on an out-of-tune drum, it's going to sound bad. So
yeah, and it's funny. It's funny because guitar players, in my experience at least, they take their gear, their pedals, their strings, their picks, everything they use very seriously, and they like obsess over everything, and you have to convince them to use something else, and they love their head and their pedals and whatever they're using. But with drummers, so often, that might be a cliche, but in my case it was really true, but so often with drummers, they don't care about tuning. They don't care about the heads on the drum. They don't even know how to tune it. Then they will let you do it because, I mean, just go ahead and they're fine. So it seems to me that many drummers have a completely different relationship with their instrument than, for example, guitarists have. I don't know why that is, but
yes. If you're listening to this and you want to be a busy session drummer, if you think that would be a cool career path, focus on your tone more than anything else. Well, I mean, and your pocket, obviously, like you have to have amazing meter and have like I mean, there's a lot, winning attitude, lots of stuff. But like, I know I record great drummers all the time, and only a handful of them though have tone. Like when they hit a drum, it sounds good, and they also coincidentally know how to tune it. But if I get two drummers hit the same drum that's tuned to the exact same, one guy might sound 100 times better than the other guy, and that's all in the hands.
Yeah, in the hands, and if they know how to set up a tune and choose equipment. But it's in the hands. I agree. But I also know drummers that play really well, and they sound okay on a crappy kit, so it really is in the hands. But their kits are just total crap. And I wish they would care about this stuff, because then it would be just so amazing. There's one guy in particular that I'm thinking of. I obviously don't say his name, but there's one guy that I know. He's such a freaking awesome drummer, such a great drummer. But every time I hear him play with his band or in whatever he plays, I just wish he would have a kit that didn't sound like shit.
Yeah.
So
you got to get both. You got to learn how to hit and sound good, but also tune and sound good.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's super important, and that's half the battle. If you get that right, if you know what you're going for, if the kit sounds like that, if you are in the right room, and if you can play like that, it almost doesn't matter as much anymore, like what microphone you throw at it. It just won't sound great. You won't get, you will get that sort of character no matter what mic you're using. You almost can't fuck it up at this point, right? So
yeah,
that's why it's so important. I'm telling you about this.
One day I want to make a record with just SM57s, and I just want to have the best musicians in the room just to prove the point. It doesn't matter what I do as an engineer when I've got the right people in the room.
Yes. Oh, that would be awesome. I'm sure it has been done, but I want to find out for myself. Sure.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, you're right. So what's your take on like dampening and controlling overtones and sustain with drums? Is that also something that you just tend to do in a similar way, or is that completely different for every record?
No, totally different for every record. So I generally prefer open kind of boomy drums. So I start with like none and see how that goes, and then add to taste really. So I like to get as much drum ringing as I can, and then I'll start dampening it down if as needed. But I'll go crazy damp. One time I literally had to take my shirt off. I had it was like an over button up shirt that a flannel. So I wasn't just naked in the studio, but it was like, we just couldn't get enough stuff on that snare to make it as dead as I wanted. So I threw a shirt on it, ended up with a big hole in the back by the end of the song.
You got to do what you got to do.
You got to do what you got to do. Yeah. So anything to get it where it needs to be. So like I said, normally I like live drums, but if the song calls for it being just like this dead thud, throw a wallet on it, throw paper on it, throw moon gels, snare ring, whatever.
Yeah, totally. And that goes with the open versus tight aesthetic. It's not only the room, it's also if the drums themselves sound open and big. You can't even get some sort of big, open, roomy vibe in a very small room if the drums are pretty open. Or there are some engineers who are just record that way. Like, for example, I've listened to an interview with Andrew Sheps, who was like, when I record drums, or when he recorded more, like I think these days he's mostly mixing, but he said, I rarely use room mics at all. I just compress the shit out of the close mics and make that sound like roomy and long and sustain. Right. And he's trying to squeeze all the sustain he can out of the close mics and like close kit mics around the kit and stuff like that, because he finds them to sound more direct and aggressive, and he just doesn't seem to like the distant way of room mics, the distant sound of room mics. So, but still, some of his drum productions sound big and somewhat roomy, even though there aren't real room mics. So that's just part of this whole open versus tight conversation, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm curious, do you find that very dry drums with a lot of dampening work well with big room sounds? Or do you tend to use like open drums with big room and like tight dead drums with tight dead room?
I tend to go open and big, but I just recently did the opposite, and it was cool.
So you did tight, like you did dead drum but big room, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just recently I did that, and it definitely was cool, and it ended up being like the perfect setup for this band, because half the songs needed to be that big and giant sounding, and then the other half needed to be like, like there was literally like brushes on the snare and stuff, and I needed it to be just like smaller sounding, and so it kind of gave me both.
Okay,
I was like able to adjust. without having to retech the kit, essentially.
That's cool. That's interesting because I rarely have success doing that. I always think, to me, when I hear a very short snare drum, for example, in a big room, it's just the short, hard attack followed by the room sustain, and it just doesn't blend well. It's just weird to me. It's like this, like if it sounds like you hit you hit the desk with a stick in a big room. It doesn't sound like a drum almost, and that's kind of, it's always weird to me. So when dead, then dead most of the times. Then I like it really dead and tight. And when big, then I like the drums also to have some sustain and just. But it might just be me, so I was curious if it's the same for you.
Yeah, it's not something I normally do, and I got to be honest, this isn't that dead. Like,
okay.
my idea of short is still in a pretty live room, and it's still bigger than most people's drums room. So, but it was smaller than I normally do.
Okay, cool. Yeah, but find out what works for you. It might be that what I just described is just the thing that works for you, and that's what makes it unique.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not a matter of wrong or right. I was just curious.
Yeah, that's very popular, actually. There's some great engineers that go for that and have great results.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so dampening. And then Malcolm said it, the way you play, your technique makes all the difference. So we've already touched on that, basically. But one thing to add here is you probably have a unique sound. And you don't have to be the best drummer on the planet, but it's just the fact that it's you makes you unique, and you play different than everybody else. And probably in your playing, or in your drummer's playing, Rollo, if you're not the drummer, there is something that's cool about that. Doesn't matter how good he or she is, there's something probably that's cool that you can emphasize, that you can bring out, and there are probably some weak spots that you might want to get rid of or work around. But if you find what's actually cool about the way he or she plays, and you can bring that out, that's one step closer to a unique drum tone. So I think that's true for almost every drummer that I've recorded so far. They all had some sort of way to their playing that was unique and that I tried to bring out in a way. So
yeah, that's a good point. Figure out what your thing is, and if it works well with what you're doing, try and emphasize it. I had this one guy that just couldn't hit the hi-hat in the same place ever. It was like, like not even like on the edge every time. Sometimes he's like getting the beat on like up high. It was just all over the place. But it ended up being this little tick, like kind of had like this varying pitch thing, and I loved it. It was like so cool because he had a pattern every once in a while, and I was like, oh man, we got to like make that happen.
Oh yeah, if he has a pattern, that's great. But usually when that happens, that's one of those things that I really can't stand. This like constant movement, but without structure on the hi-hat. But
right.
Yeah, but you're totally right. You just have to view it differently. If that's what makes it unique, and if there's a pattern, or if it's just the way like he plays, and it could be a groove and a cool thing. Totally.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. And then what are the drum parts that have been written? Obviously, that's also important. Like a good song will sound better. So if the drum part fits the song, that's also will sound better, and that can also be unique because the writing and the style you arrange your songs and you write the songs is also unique to you. There are certain bands actually where I immediately notice them based on how they write. It can be a melody, it can be a groove, but some writers have something to the way they write that you, even if a different drummer plays it, you can tell that it's by this band or something.
Right. Yeah, definitely. That's where a good producer comes in, and in this case, it's got to be yourself. So you have to like really frame your mind to be open to new ideas coming in like that. Maybe you got to like cut out cymbals for a section or something, and that's going to dramatically make that part darker. And maybe that's what you're going for. Your target was this dark drum sound. So think of it from an arrangement point of view as well, not just the sound of the drums.
Oh, yeah.
If you're, again, going for a dark drum sound, but all of your parts are just like crashing on the ride, it's not going to be that dark relatively.
Oh, yeah. Nope. Probably won't. That's a good point, actually. It's not even the way you write, like from an artistic standpoint, but just if it makes sense, if the stuff you're hitting sounds the way you want the song to sound. Like, you're totally right. Yeah. Yeah, also bright and dark, and also how much room you leave for everything else. That's also a thing. Like a crashed ride throughout the part takes up all the space, basically, whereas a closed hi-hat is not getting in the way of anything most of the time. So, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Would you go through this list, maybe, that you added at the bottom of our notes here, like some odd styles to consider? Because I really love that. Those are some ideas outside of what we just were talking about, outside of the obvious things, and maybe just go through them and explain what you mean by those and why they could be a way to achieve a unique tone.
Sure thing. So an album that blew my mind when I first heard it in the most recent couple of years, Nothing But Thieves. They're UK, I think, not really sure, but they put out an album called Broken Machine, and the drums sound insane on it. It's super like pumpy and stuff like that. But this is an example of like compression as a weapon. So they are just hitting it so hard, so hard, so hard that it's like literally causing things to duck. And it sounds really unique to me. Like it stood out. It worked with what they were doing sonically. That's obviously something you're kind of taught to avoid in a lot of cases. But in this case, it was the bomb. So compression being used just like to a crazy degree to achieve a new sound is something I'm a huge fan of. Compression and distortion, I guess. But then another album, which I think most people will know, is a band called Royal Blood. And to my understanding, they did this on both of their albums, but they record without cymbals. So they literally throw up like sponges, I think, on stands, so that he has something to hit, right? But like that doesn't make a sound into the overheads and whatnot. And they record the entire kit without cymbals, and then he'll actually overdub the cymbals. And then that lets them go down the crazy road of using compression to an insane degree without their cymbals getting just like obliterated by all this compression, right? So that's going to obviously sound hugely different than if the cymbals were in there. Like now you can have cleaner cymbals, but just really messed up drum shells, and that can be quite a sound. And they're not the first people to do that by any stretch, but it's just a good example if you want to check it out. I know some guys that do sans kick. They overdub their kick drum, and that's usually for like performance reasons more so than sonic reasons, but it would give you some more ability to do things differently there as well. I know, go back to the 80s and overdubbing toms was a big thing, so you could get the big like perfectly, all separated, and like, literally recording one tom at a time and just like going to such a crazy degree. But it had a sound, like, do you see people going kind of back to electronic drum sounds, but using real drums now to get there, which can be really cool. Like Arctic Monkeys did that on AM, where they would like record a real drum, but just the one drum at a time, and then kind of build a song off of like their custom samples. So it's like they made their own drum machine library kind of thing. It's super vibey. You can kind of break down like the typical drum sounds by changing how you actually even go about performing them, which I think is interesting.
Totally. I've noticed this trend, even with very heavy bands or stuff that's up until recently was like organic drums, heavily processed, and huge drums, but organic drums. But now I come across sounds more often that clearly sound like electronic toms or something. Yeah, I've totally noticed that. Also, kick drums sometimes. Kick drums sound electronic as well sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really cool when it's done well. Like maybe it goes to this like breakdown verse, and the snare all of a sudden changes to like this electronic.
Yeah, I know.
Or like an 808 comes in. And you have to think of that in advance, right? So that they can play the rest of it, but leave out that one drum you're planning to change and replace. That's definitely cool. I mean, those are just some random ideas I thought of at 5 a.m. here. So I'm sure there's more, but I thought maybe people would find them interesting and inspiring and want to experiment a little bit.
Totally. That's why I wanted you to go through this list because I think those are the things that make it truly interesting. And we also have almost we have a complete like episode on like creative out of the box things. It's not about like drums specifically, but most of the episode is about drums actually. So if you want to listen to, I just look up the number. If you want to listen to episode 21, it's called Spice Up Your Recordings with Creative Reamping and Unique Effects. Part of that episode, a big part of it actually, is about drums and not about guitars, as you might assume when you hear the title. Because reamping drums, using weird devices for drums, creating those electronic sorts of sounds, or like, just going crazy and like mangling your drum tones to whatever you want, is fun. Makes for unique sounds, and we dedicated this whole episode to this topic. So you might want to check out this for some more inspiration, in addition to what Malcolm just said in his list here.
Right on.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
I hope that was interesting.
Yeah, me too. That's basically all I can say. It's just a difficult topic. There's no clear answer. I can't tell someone how to make their drums sound unique exactly. You just we can only give you what we just did, like tips and strategies and tactics, and you will need to experiment and find out on your own. But I hope this will at least be helpful and make it a little easier for you.
Definitely. And the beauty of everything we talked about, all those steps, is that they'll help you even if you're trying to make a totally normal drum sound.
Oh yeah, totally forgot about that. Yes. It's true. We could also have just called it how to record drums, but no.
Yeah, no, we couldn't.
But that's interesting actually that you say that, because it's basically how to record anything. Because I don't think there's a point in recording just something that somebody else has already done. Recording art or music is always about this vision, goal, how to make it work, how to make it a reality, how to make it unique. I think that's just what recording should be. And if you don't do it, the record will probably not be exciting. So, I totally agree. That's just the way you record.
Definitely.
Cool.
Right on.
Awesome. Then see you next week. And let us know if you have any questions. Like if you are like Rollo in a band struggling with something, just let us know. Shoot us an email. We love getting those. We might make another episode when we get another interesting question like that. And it's really fun. It's kind of challenging for us as well. It's like, it gets us thinking. We might even come across new ideas that we can use in our production. So we can all benefit from that. It's interesting. Somebody gets his questions answered or her questions. So it's a win-win. Send us your questions. We love that.
Definitely.
See you next week. Bye.
Okay. Take care. Bye.